The sun was already high when fear finally said its name. It had been hiding in the corners of the room all night, clinging to the walls like damp shadows, but daylight did not chase it away. Fear stayed even when the curtains were open, even when the world outside pretended everything was normal. That was the moment when safety stopped being a place and became a choice, when two strangers realized that trust could be louder than terror. One bed, one room, one person choosing the cold floor so another could breathe. If you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances even when life has broken them, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this survive because of people like you. Arav had never planned to open his door to anyone that morning. The day had started like all his others, with the sun pouring into his small apartment and the distant sound of traffic reminding him that the city never waited for grief to finish. He had learned that the hard way. 2 years earlier, life had taught him how quickly everything could collapse, how a single phone call could turn a future into a quiet, empty room. Since then, he had learned to keep his world small and predictable, to wake up early, make his coffee strong, and avoid unnecessary complications. The knock on his door broke that routine. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was a delivery mistake or a neighbor who needed something trivial. But the knock came again, softer this time, followed by a sound that was almost a sob but not quite. When he opened the door, the hallway light spilled over a woman he had never seen before. Her name, he would later learn, was Mira. In that moment, she was just a human shape wrapped in exhaustion, her eyes hollow with a fear that had not slept. She did not step inside immediately. She stood there as if crossing the threshold required permission from something deeper than him. Arav noticed the way her hands shook, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder as if the walls themselves were a threat. He did not ask questions. He did not need to. Some stories announce themselves without words. Inside his apartment, the simplicity of his life was exposed. One bedroom, one bed, a small kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee and toast. Sunlight filled the space generously, making it feel safer than it actually was. Mira's shoulders loosened slightly as the door closed behind her, but fear did not leave her eyes. It stayed there, stubborn and alert. Arav understood that look. He had seen it in the mirror after the funeral, after the house had emptied and silence had become unbearable. It was the look of someone who no longer trusted the world to be gentle. There was an unspoken tension in the air, heavy and awkward. Mira's gaze drifted toward the bedroom, then away, as if the idea of rest itself frightened her. Arav felt the weight of the situation settle on his chest. He knew what she was thinking, even if neither of them said it. One bed. No clear boundaries. A lifetime of reasons not to feel safe. So he made a decision that surprised even himself. He pulled a blanket from the couch, folded it carefully, and laid it on the floor near the bed, far enough to give space but close enough to offer presence. The floor was hard and cold, but it felt right. He wanted her to understand something without forcing her to trust too quickly. Safety was not about comfort. It was about choice. The day moved slowly after that. The city outside continued its rhythm, indifferent to the quiet healing happening inside a small apartment. Arav made tea and placed it on the table, careful not to invade Mira's space. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture stiff, as if relaxing might cause something terrible to happen. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow made her tense. Arav busied himself with small tasks, giving her room to exist without pressure. He washed dishes that were already clean. He adjusted the curtains even though the sunlight was fine. In doing so, he was also managing his own emotions. Helping her stirred something inside him that he had kept buried for a long time. A sense of purpose. A reminder that he could still be useful to someone else's survival. As the hours passed, Mira's breathing slowed. The daylight seemed to reassure her in a way the night never could. She began to notice details she had missed earlier. The framed photograph on the shelf of a smiling older woman, the stack of books with dog-eared pages, the faint hum of life continuing outside. This was not a dangerous place. It was simply a broken one, inhabited by someone who understood brokenness. Mira's story unfolded gradually, not in words but in moments. The way she startled at the sound of footsteps in the hallway suggested a history of being followed. The way she held her cup with both hands hinted at nights spent cold and alone. Arav did not push. He let silence do what it does best when it is safe, allow truth to surface at its own pace. By afternoon, exhaustion finally claimed her. Her eyes closed, not in deep sleep but in something close enough to rest. Arav stayed where he was on the floor, leaning against the bed, the blanket wrapped tightly around him. His body ached, but he did not move. He remembered how terrifying sleep had been after his own loss, how the darkness behind closed eyes had felt like a threat. Being there mattered more than comfort. As Mira slept, Arif's thoughts drifted back to the person he had lost. Ria had been the kind of person who believed fiercely in kindness, who would have opened the door without hesitation and offered the bed without question. Loving her had changed him. Losing her had almost undone him. In helping Mira, he felt a small part of Ray's spirit moving through him again, guiding his choices. The real challenge came later, when fear returned with memories instead of shadows. Mira woke suddenly, her body rigid, her eyes wide with panic. She did not scream, but the terror was unmistakable. Arif stayed still, making sure his presence did not become another threat. Slowly, she realized where she was. Slowly, the room came back into focus. The bed, the window, the man on the floor who had not moved. Something shifted then. Trust does not arrive all at once. It seeps in through the cracks, filling the empty spaces left by trauma. Mira's shoulders relaxed just enough to signal a change. She sat up, pulling the blanket closer around herself, and for the first time since arriving, she looked at Arif not as a potential danger but as a human being. The afternoon light softened as it stretched toward evening. Arif checked the time, aware that daylight would not last forever. He wondered what would happen when night returned, when the world grew quiet and memories grew loud. He also knew that he could not fix everything. Safety was temporary. Healing was not linear. But sometimes, a single day of peace could be enough to remind someone that survival was possible. Mira eventually spoke, her voice fragile but steady enough to exist. She shared pieces of her story, fragmented and incomplete. A relationship that had turned controlling. A home that had stopped being safe. Friends who had chosen comfort over confrontation. A morning where she had finally left, with nothing but fear and determination guiding her steps. Arif listened without interruption. He did not offer solutions. He offered presence. As she spoke, Arif felt the familiar ache of empathy. He knew what it meant to lose a sense of home. He knew how betrayal could hollow a person out. Listening to Mira, he realized that his own grief had made him quieter but not colder. If anything, it had sharpened his ability to recognize pain in others. When she finished, there was no dramatic resolution, no sudden relief. Just two people sitting in a room, acknowledging that the world could be cruel and that survival sometimes depended on unexpected kindness. Arif stood up slowly and offered her the space he had been protecting all day. He reminded her, gently, that she was not obligated to stay, that help could take many forms. But Mira stayed. As evening approached, they prepared for the coming night. Arif arranged extra blankets and pillows, turning the floor into something almost comfortable. He kept the lights on longer than usual, understanding that darkness could wait. Mira watched him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She had expected suspicion, conditions, questions. What she received instead was respect. Before the day ended, Arif made a quiet request to you, the viewer. If this story is already touching something inside you, if you are thinking about someone who needed kindness when the world was harsh, remember that small acts matter. Share this story. Let it travel. Let it remind people that safety can be created, even temporarily, by choosing empathy. Night eventually arrived, but it did not bring the terror Mira had feared. The room remained calm. Arif stayed awake longer than necessary, listening to her breathing, ensuring that peace held. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel alone in his grief. Helping someone else had softened the sharp edges of his own pain. Morning came again, brighter and warmer than the last. Mira woke with less fear and more clarity. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Shelters, legal steps, rebuilding a life from fragments. But she also knew something else now. She knew that strangers could choose kindness without expecting anything in return. Arif watched her prepare to leave, noticing the subtle changes in her posture. She stood taller. Her eyes carried a little more light. When she reached the door, she paused, not out of fear this time, but out of gratitude. Some moments do not need words. They imprint themselves on the heart and stay there. After she left, the apartment felt quieter but not empty. Arif folded the blanket from the floor and placed it back on the couch. The bed remained unremarkable, just furniture again. But the space itself felt transformed. He realized that safety was not something you owned. It was something you offered. Just before this story ends, I want to ask you something special. If you have ever been helped by a stranger, or if you hope to be that safe place for someone one day, comment the word, kindness, below. Let this space fill with proof that compassion still exists alive, and your kindness might inspire someone else to be brave enough to open their door.